expectation was that the tomb it was still dark. She couldn't get a quite full glimpse of the tomb, but as she began to walk up there, no doubt she was close distance in the darkness. She could begin to see that something was not right. Closer, she begins to see that she gets close enough in the darkness, she sees that the stone had been rolled away. And she walks up to this tomb, and she sees that it is body in the tomb. Back to the disciples with only one. They've taken Jesus' body. Someone stole the body of Jesus. Mary has no thought of resurrection. Mary has no thought that Jesus. Mary has no thought of divine intervention. She's only thinking of human interference. The only thing that she thinks of is that comes to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Mary hesitated. Now Mary, she went back to the disciples. What happened? She said, hey, they thought it happened. They stole the body. So here are the disciples, right? They're hanging out. They're sitting around, they're relaxed. No doubt when Mary comes running back and says, hey, the tomb's empty, they're like, yeah, we know, right? Jesus said it. Why are you freaking out? They didn't steal the body. No! They were hiding. They were for their lives. I like how one pastor put it. He said, no amens from that one, ladies, you know? No surprise. Absolutely afraid. But two of them said, all right, we got to go check this out. So Peter and John, the one whom Jesus loved, again, John is the writer of this gospel. Loved. They did what? Verse 3. Peter and the other disciples running, but the other disciple out that got those in for us, right? John's very but very slow to run to the grave. And so John 1, what does verse 5 say? He stooped and looked in and saw the linen wrappings lying there. But what? He didn't go in. John hesitated. He comes sprinting up to the tomb and just stops. He looks in, he sees the body gone, he sees the linen wrappings lying there, but he didn't go in. Some of you this Easter, it's where you may be right now. You've heard of the Easter story. You've maybe, hey, you've been to church a few times here and there. I've heard it. Maybe, hey, you've heard your grandma talk about it. Maybe an aunt, right? Hey, you've seen our McDonald's, right? Beautifully painted, so you know that something's up around Easter season. He is risen. You've seen it. But maybe, just maybe, that's just you've gone. And you've hesitated. You stopped. You've paused. And you haven't allowed yourself to look inside the tomb yet. And just for the record, I want to be clear on something. The tomb was actually empty. Like that, historically, that is widely agreed upon. There's very little disagreement that the tomb was actually empty. The question is not, was the tomb empty? The question is, why? Why did Mary hesitate? Why did John hesitate? Here are hesitating resurrection of Jesus. In my viewpoint, there are only full answers. The second one, which is what I believe is true. Why? There are some out there that they believe the body was taken. Brief passage, we see God show 6 and 7. It says, and Simon, he also noticed the linen wrap, while the cloth that had covered Jesus' head and the other wrappings. What was left? The burial wrappings, the linen wrappings that they had hastily wrapped Jesus in as they're trying to give him a quick burial and put him in the tomb. They were left. You may be thinking, Jess, why is that a big deal? Why does that pretty much debunk the idea that the body was stolen? Not only, right? What does it say? Not only were the linens in there, but what does it say? Verse 7, they were what? They were folded up and lying apart from the other wrappings. The linens were folded. And by the way, can we just take a side note and just give some credit to Mary, Jesus' mother, right? She raised him well, that even on his resurrection morning, she taught him how to make his bed, and he took the time to do that, right? I'm still praying for that miracle in my house, okay? This is the miracle within the miracle, all right? But they're folded. Why is that significant? If you were committing a crime, would you take the time to make someone's bed? Think about that. If you were breaking into someone's house, you're trying to steal something, would you go, oh man, I mean, maybe you're like me and you actually hate it when your bed's not made, and maybe you're like, oh, I might actually do that. For the large part, like if you're committing a crime, you're in, you're out, you're fast. You're not going to sit there and make the time to actually fold the linens, right? It's very significant that Jesus gave us this detail. On top of that, right, this is a 3-day-old body. The last thing you would want to do is remove the spices and the linens from the body. They were there for a reason. What Jesus is doing, right? What God is doing in the simple fact, this one little fact, that the linens were folded is enough evidence to show us that Jesus truly rose. There's no other reason that this would happen except that Jesus took the time to fold the linens. You. I asked him, it's relevant because Jesus knew you would need this detail. Jesus knew that you would be standing outside this. Jesus knew that you would be looking from the outside in. And so he gave you. Jesus moved for you. Jesus wants you to think. He wants you to look. Being a out and put on the seat next to us. Scripture tells us to consider, to reflect. Jesus folded these lips. Say, I don't know, I need to look in this. Jesus says, come and look. You'll know the truth. No matter how hard you try to debunk it, you'll find that it is out. What happened to, what does it say in verse 8? The tomb first also went in and what? Saw. He saw. Until then, they hadn't understood the scriptures that Jesus rise from the dead. John, he did not let his hesitancy get it. The most important truth in the entire rose from the dead. You're not going, you know what? Jess. In fact, I'm back there with you feel is fear. You're scared. Well, as we look at the resurrection account, here's what we see next. Jesus knows your fears. See, when he rose, he was thinking of Mary. He was thinking of John. He was thinking of their hesitancy. But he was also thinking about his disciples who were locked away because they were scared. And he knew their fears, and he also knows yours as well. So look at the scene starting in verse 19. It says that Sunday evening the disciples were meeting behind. They were afraid. They were afraid of the Maybe that's you today. If you walked in here today and guys returning, you're scared about, you're afraid that you might be doing something, you might, fear Jesus. Fear that to actually follow him. You think are consequences of following. Maybe you walked in here today and you're scared to follow Jesus. You life. Person in your life that you've gained their friendship and gained their approval. That if you follow Jesus, then this friend of yours, and you're scared. You're scared of what they may think. You're afraid of what it may mean. And then there's the reality, like, you don't know how to live. And if your whole life is about only pleasing Jesus, losing people's. Maybe for some of you, it's the fear of losing something. You're like, Jess, hey, listen, I know if I follow Jesus, then I'm going to have to change some things in my life. A life that don't line up with Scripture. And Jess, I don't want to lose. And maybe you don't want to lose those things because they're the only things that bring you those little glimpses of happiness. And the thought of living life without those momentary blips of happiness is absolutely terrifying. And you're like, hey, there's no way I could give that up. But here's the reality. Those little moments of happiness, all you're doing is numbing yourself. Not to feel. You're using that moment to cover up what's really going on, and what you know that's happening inside, that's what you don't want to deal with. And you're so afraid that if you remove these things, that then you're going to have to enter into these feelings you don't want to feel anymore. And you're so scared to bring them to Jesus because you don't know what he's going to do. Maybe for some of you, it's the fear of loss of control. You've worked so hard to get your family right, to get your social circles right, to get your bank accounts right. Hey, Jess, I've got this. I don't need Jesus. And you're so scared that if you begin to follow Jesus, that if Jesus is going to do to your life, you're afraid of how he may take control and disrupt it. Jesus knows have when you're wrestling with the idea of the empty tomb. He knows it because he saw his very own disciples living it. So what did Jesus do? Verse 19, that evening the disciples, Jewish leaders, standing there among them, and what did he say? Peace. As he spoke, he showed them the wounds in his hands and on the side. And what happened? They were filled with joy when they saw the Lord. Said, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I am you. There was the anxiety. He said, give those to me. And what am I going to give you? Peace and joy. So many of you, You just want to be at peace. If you just come to the tomb and look in and see the linens and see that I am truly raised from the dead and you follow me, I'm going to take that anxiety and I'm going to give you peace. I'm going to take that fear, that those momentary bits of happiness that you keep running after, and here's what I'm going to give you instead. I'm going to give you joy. A joy that lasts for all eternity. A joy that only comes from the Lord, that can never be taken because it is a gift to you. If you are hiding behind the locked doors, Jesus is saying, come. I see you. I know you. I know your fears. I need you to come and take this peace and joy. Don't let the fear of the unknown stop you from living a life with Jesus. A couple of weeks ago, I was on spring break, traveling with my family, and we went to the amusement park, and it was so cool. I saw each one of my 3 kids overcome a fear. They rode a ride that was super scary to them, and there's one kid in particular that it was a bit of a battle, and we were sitting there, and I said, listen, I promise no matter what happens on this ride, you will not regret it on the other side. Just trust me. And this kid said, all right, let's do it. And they went on it. And you know what their response was right afterwards? Let's do it again. The things, and you know what? It didn't work. Again, it's not a life worth living. But when you take hold of the peace and joy of Jesus Christ, that's the vibrancy of life. The sky becomes blue, the grass becomes greener.